All right. What's up, people? Who's out there? Sorry, I know I'm a few minutes late. I am always like this. It's because I just got in a little fight with my wife right before I was supposed to start this. It wasn't really a fight. It's just, one of those situations where you're hanging out, talking, just having a little chit chat, and then the conversation just slightly gets into more difficult terrain. And then you could just let it fizzle back down to zero, but you just instinctually kind of escalate the intensity, and then it starts getting a little tense because you're on fraught ground, and then the other person gets a little tense, so maybe they get accidentally to escalating it, and it's all good. We settled it, but it just took a few extra minutes to resolve. So it cut into my otherwise organized planning and time management. Chat is funny. So, yeah, happy to be back on the air. I have actually a lot of streams planned this week. I should maybe tell you about them a little bit briefly. On Thursday, I'm going to be talking with Kishore Buddha, who is an academic based in Britain, who recently decided to leave academia, in part, I think, from a set of deep frustrations with the bureaucracy and the generally kind of twisted and kind of insane ideological and bureaucratic loops that constitute the contemporary academic lifestyle and system. I talked with him privately a few days ago, and we kind of aired a lot of laundry, and we're definitely on the same page on many things with our just utter contempt for many aspects of contemporary academic life. He's already defected. He has a business that he runs, and he's a very entrepreneurial guy. But he's very articulate, very interesting, and has a lot of well-considered thoughts about the nature of academia today and higher education today and the future of higher education also. So we're going to talk about, we're going to air some laundry. And, a lot of academics don't actually talk very honestly about what academia is really like, because if they're in academia, you have to kind of mince your words. And, there's a strong strategic interest to, kind of tiptoe around the edges of the actual issues and problems that the contemporary academic system and life entails. So since he's defected, hopefully his strategic incentives for mincing his words will be significantly decreased. And I mean, let's face it, here I am on the internet spending a fair amount of my time nowadays doing shit like this and blogging and podcasting. I suppose I'm probably beyond my control at this point. I'm probably irrevocably, maybe irreversibly, on a vector towards some sort of grand departure from academia at some point. I mean, I don't necessarily want that, but it's hard for me to see how I could continue on my current trajectory of my interests and the way that I'm pursuing them and everything. And also, like, it's not clear to me how long I could last as an academic, but I'll be interested to test the limits and to see what happens. I don't have any immediate plans to leave academia, but I'm definitely making increasingly escalated wagers that are inconsistent with academia. And I suspect at a certain point, there'll just be some breaking point where either I get fired or I can't take it anymore, and I just set sail for the smooth space of pure internet intellectual life, or some other event occurs to kind of mark the necessity of this transition, or to seal the deal, as it were. Or maybe I stay in academia for the next 5 years, 10 years, who knows. All I know is I'm done with a lot of the bullshit. I'm withdrawing all of my energy and attention away from everything that's rotten in academia, and I'm putting all of my energy and effort into just seeking the truth and seeking what I'm interested in and seeking my passions, and basically just trying to increase my own joy, really, my own intellectual intensity. Trying to bring that to the highest pitch possible. And in many ways, that seems like it's not consistent with what I'm supposed to be doing. So, yeah, my sense is there'll be some sort of rupture sooner or later, but I'll let circumstances decide that. I'm just going to kind of stay focused on what I'm interested in, do what I believe in, and let the chips fall where they may. That's kind of on that. That's kind of what I'm doing now. And that's how I understand my current, distribution of intellectual and professional energies, I would say. All right. So looking at the chat, the waifu video. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't remember putting out a waifu video. Well, actually, could someone remind me what waifu is? That's like anime, isn't it? I don't I don't really know these things. You weren't sure what to make of it. Maybe you could tell me more about what you're talking about. Yeah, Kishore Buddha. That's right. 1D though. Right. So that's Thursday. We'll be talking about academia and these sorts of topics. And then on Friday, I made a parody video with my wife. Yeah, we made a few videos back in the day. I've been trying to get her to come on the stream, but I think she kind of wants to chill in the background. Maybe one day I'll get her on. But yeah. So on Friday, I'm going to be talking with this person on the internet who goes by the name of Storm King. He's a what you'd call decelerationist, and I don't really know too much about what that is, other than what's sort of obvious, that it's positioned against accelerationism, and these people are very much not interested in accelerating the system, as it were. So they draw on people like Ted Kaczynski and Linkola. I don't know how you pronounce that exactly, Linkola or Linkola. But yeah, exactly, an prim dude, as they say. And although I think Storm King and people like him, I think they kind of differ a little bit from what is called anprim or anarchist primitivism. But this is exactly the type of question I just want to ask them. So that's the whole point of these conversations I'm having. It's like it's so much easier to just fire up the video chat and just ask people questions. Like you could spend hours reading through blogs trying to understand like what the new internet intellectual movement is, but you can spend hours reading blogs and still not really grasp it, because to be fair, let's be honest, and I'm not shitting on anyone in particular, but let's be honest that a lot of the internet intellectual trends, they're really not very deep. I mean, a lot of times they don't have significant intellectual effort behind them. There's not like really long and thoughtful, considered pieces of work to kind of present systematic philosophies. Often it's literally a hashtag and a few accounts with certain themes or aesthetic. And this is the world we're in today, and I'm not shitting on it. Precisely, the opposite. I'm interested in this new kind of these new sort of emerging theoretical perspectives that are quite superficial, and in a good sense. Superficiality can be good. It means it's light. It means it's fluid. It means it's not overwrought. And aesthetics and the audio visual communicative trappings of fast, rapidly arising and decentralized kind of like perspectives, that's very interesting, and that might very well be an improvement on the heavy, slow, prodding, overly serious nature of most intellectual or philosophical movements as we know them through most of history as big, serious affairs. So yeah, I'm quite favorably disposed. I don't mean to be describing these movements in a harsh or judgmental or academic way. I'm just saying that the reality is they often don't really even have like strong statements of systematic positions. So if you really want to know what people are thinking and what's at the bottom of all of this, it seems to me a video chat is one of the best possible ways to do it. Not only because it's live and you can just sort of ask the questions that you want. But because it's live, people listening can also kind of contribute. So it's a kind of collective effort to just get on the same page about what something even is. I feel like the interview with Nick Land was a really good example. I was quite proud of that one as a successful example of that. Like, I actually left that long conversation with a significantly improved understanding of what Nick thinks and the ideas they've been pushing out. So yeah, I just want to do more of that. I want to figure out these fascinating and strange, although sometimes seemingly perhaps somewhat, you know, superficial, or maybe another way to put it would be to call them, you know, uh, theories in early stages of development. I want to kind of ask questions that might help pull out strands that maybe weren't even consciously, articulated or placed anywhere yet. Anyway, neural shroud, right? What are you trying to say? That Hellcom shit posting is not important? No, exactly. I think I gave a good qualification as to how I'm precisely not saying that. And obviously, from the videos I've been making and conversations I've been having, I think you all can tell I'm quite sincerely, and respectfully to some degree, to quite a degree, I would say, respectfully interested in these new emergent kind of theoretical perspectives, even though I don't know what a lot of them really are, or what they represent, or how deep they really go. But I have an open mind towards trying to figure it out. Is my point. Yeah, Gulfire, I agree. A lot of ACT short for accelerationism, feels under theorized, but that's also why it's exciting. Yes, I completely agree. It's possibilities. It's theoretical and intellectual openings. But we all have to figure out ways to expand those openings. And I guess my little experiment right now is doing it through video chat, which I just find to be a very efficient way of doing it, and fun and stimulating, and also evidently to at least some people kind of entertaining. So anyway, enough meta discussion. Right, I'm actually just going over the schedule, right? So Thursday night, 8 p.m. UK time, that's 3 p.m. Eastern time, I'll be talking to Kishore Buddha. That'll be about higher education. Already went over that. And then on Friday afternoon, 1 p.m. UK time, I'll be talking to Storm King, aka at Linkola Wave. And that'll be 1 p.m. UK time, which is 8 a.m. Eastern time. So, right. So, let's just get into it, shall we? Soon I'll be joined by Antjuan Finch. I think that's how you pronounce it. We can learn from him. But he's been a person in my orbit for some time now. We've been friendly on Twitter for a little bit. It seems like an interesting dude. Again, I just don't know that much about him, but he's got some interesting ideas. He has this concept of sustainism, and he's very interested in kind of like how to engineer like social systems of collective meaning in optimal ways. So that's obviously overlaps with a lot of stuff I'm interested in, and I guess that's how he found me or whatever. So other news, oh man, actually lots of news. I got to think about what I want to share for today. I've already been blabbing for about 18 minutes. So for now, I think I want to share with you that, as I've kind of alluded to in previous streams, the little community, the little private community that I've been alluding to, that I've been building, I think it's been going quite well. As I said, I'm kind of welcoming in people in batches, and I would say that so far I'm quite, I wouldn't say pleasantly surprised, because I'm not too surprised. It's kind of what I was hoping for and planning for, but I'm very happy with the fact that it seems like a little microculture is emerging. I guess that's ultimately, and that's a term I've been thinking about more. That's ultimately, I guess, what I'm trying to do with this private community is just playing my part in like facilitating a microculture. So just creating the circumstances and the variables and the space that, given some time and energy and some chance, might kind of erupt or grow into an organic and self-sustaining, self-reinforcing commons that perhaps becomes increasingly empowering or productive, or a bunch of different aspects of joyful, healthy community dynamics might emerge from a well orchestrated and designed little institutionalized space, minimally institutionalized, I would say. That's what we've been doing, and I'm happy to report that I think in the first week or two, as I've slowly welcomed in more and more people, there's some real intellectual, commonalities being discovered and some interesting lines of thought already kind of emerging. And I'm making little tweaks as we go to kind of make the technical background of the space. It's a Discord server, a little bit more like functional and spruced up and spiffy. So, as I said in the previous streams, if this is something that interests you, if you haven't done so already, just shoot me a DM on Twitter, or go to the about section of my YouTube and find my email and shoot me an email, and I'll add you to the list of people I'm slowly inviting in. I'm just inviting in a handful of new people each week as I kind of build it up. But I've gone over that enough, so won't go over it anymore. Right. What else is a little tidbit, just a little data point, if you will. I just this morning I sent out a pitch for a book proposal. I've actually been working on it for some time now, but these things fall to the back burner. But I'm really excited about it. It would be my first book, and I've actually already written 2 chapters of it, and I have like a legit detailed like 25-page proposal that I've edited a bunch of times and received feedback from other more experienced people and people who've authored books before. And yeah, I think I'm very confident. I think it could potentially be like a really splashy book. I once, a couple years ago, wrote a book. It was like a crazy batshit like theory book. It's a whole book that I've basically already done, and I think it's pretty damn cool, but it's like incredibly idiosyncratic and strange and fringe. And I sent it to a few publishers about a year ago. That first book that I wrote, a theory book, and it didn't get any love. It didn't get any takers. No one wanted to publish it, so that's fine. I decided to kind of set that aside. I admittedly, it's too strange. It's very strange and probably bad, I'm sure, also in a few different ways. So I'm sure that it deserves to have not been published. But that was just my first effort to write a book, and it was, yeah, it was worthwhile. I still believe in it. I think it's really cool. But I realized that I need to do a more proper, professional, kind of normal book that is actually recognizable as a sellable book by publishers, to at least for my first book. I think like when I right now so far as I don't have any book, I'm kind of like an unknown quantity for a publisher or for a literary agent. So I think I decided basically at some point that I would just suck it up and try to write something pretty normal, or at least like with the normal packaging. But then once I get the contract, I can really I can be as creative as I want and kind of sneak in my kind of weird fringe stuff. But for the proposal and for getting the contract, you got to really like make it look and sound and feel like very normal, and like it's going to be the next bestseller or something like that. So I've put a lot of time and energy into making that type of proposal for that type of book. You guys could probably guess what it's about or what the framing would be. But I'll leave you in suspense for that for now. We can talk about it maybe in another stream later. If you have questions, let me know. If that's something that you want to hear more about, I'd be happy to go into it. But for now, I'll leave it a little mysterious. But anyway, I just polished that up and sent out a pitch today. And I need to do like a bunch more. That's kind of like my goal for this week, or for the next couple weeks, really, is to basically just send out like 25 pitches to like different agents, really. All that I can find online that do nonfiction anywhere near kind of like what I'm working on. So I'll keep you posted on that. And yeah, just thought I'd share that. Just going over my notes for interesting news items or discussion items just to share with you all. Oh, the YouTube channel is kind of doing well, I would say. I mean, I never really like set out to do these streams for any kind of like, I never had any imagination that these like fringe topics that I'm interested in would like take off in popularity anytime soon. So I've had a, I think very grounded sense of that. But given like how fringe my topics are and the stuff I'm making on YouTube is, I have to say I'm kind of inspired and emboldened by the growth of the channel. So like to be monetized, you have to have certain thresholds met. Um, you have to have 4,000 hours, I think, or minutes, I forget, whichever one of those makes sense, over the past 12 months. And you have to have 1,000 subscribers. And when I started making these videos, it was on an old account that already had it only had about 300 subscribers. And like not nearly enough watch time, like something like 30% of the watch time necessary to reach the monetization threshold. And just since I started making like this wave of videos over the past few months, I'm now at like 90% of the watch time that's needed to cross the monetization threshold, and I'm about 70% of the subscriber counts that I need to reach that threshold. Now, look, don't get too excited. The monetization is going to be like nothing, because like you need to have massive views and a massive channel to actually make any kind of serious money on YouTube. And obviously, that's not my intention. I think my content is just does not have that kind of legs. So that's cool. That's not really what I'm gunning for. Although if it were to happen, I wouldn't, I wouldn't be against it. Anyway, I'm just sharing with you that the metrics are pretty favorable. It's a sign of, it's a sign that there's at least just enough people interested in what I'm doing to make me motivated to keep kind of doing it, and also trying to do it better and kind of building it up and building it out and growing it. So yeah, that's kind of cool. So thank you all for watching my shit and liking it and subscribing and replying and all that kind of stuff. That all boosts my videos in the algorithm or whatever. And yeah, probably in the next like week or two, well, within the next month, the next few months for sure, I will cross that monetization threshold and start making like $5 a month or something like that. But hey, that's cool. It's something. Anyway, so that's been cool to see. Just wanted to share those metrics with you. What else? Right. Well, I said that I would talk that I wanted to talk a little bit more in detail about some of the hazier kind of abstract ideas that I floated in my last talk about the book about Spinoza by Antonio Damasio. And basically, yeah, in that kind of book review, kind of extended set of rough hazy meditations, I laid out a bunch of ideas, and I got some feedback. Again, this is the little community I've been building coming through for me. Some of the people in there, because we're kind of in close contact now and we hang out in the space together, I got some immediate good feedback. So one of the questions that someone asked me was they wanted to hear more about an idea that I mentioned in that talk. The idea being, I think, what I called bifurcated affective acceleration. And that's just a ridiculously unwieldy way of saying a simple thing, which is that it seems to me there is a phenomenon going on that's basically, think of it as analogous to income inequality dynamics, but at the level of affect. And so basically what I'm talking about is that I think some non-trivial segment of the population is basically going in a downward spiral of emotional despair. And then there's also pockets of the population, probably much smaller, that are going through upward spirals of accelerating kind of joyousness. And I talked about how, using Damasio's language, the former is labeled in our culture generally by the term tragedy, and the latter is labeled in our culture generally by the term of glory, right? And so I think that there are these alternative forks in the road kind of opening up right now, and this is accentuated and kind of brought into stark relief by the acceleration of techno-economic variables. That is basically that those technomic variables are basically putting increasing pressure on people to sort out their emotional states. And so, I mean, you see this in a trivial way, or in a more kind of mainstream way, I should say, not to trivialize it. But you see this, I think, with the work of someone like Jordan Peterson, and why is he like so popular, and why is he become such a lightning rod of cultural conflict right now, being so attractive to so many people and also strangely anathema to other people, even though he's just like a pretty mild-mannered academic guy who says things that he thinks. Well, I think that's because he's touching very directly on kind of the pivot that determines the separation of accelerating positive affect or glory and accelerating, negative affect or tragedy, leading ultimately to kind of unlimited sorrow and depressiveness and ultimately suicide. The question is, and this is something that I talked about in my last stream, but I think I was quite hazy about it, is we know what happens when people have emotional states that go into a cycle of positive feedback or a process of positive feedback that is exponentially reproducing depressiveness. We know what that looks like vaguely. It looks like depression and ultimately suicide. There's a kind of well-known explosive pathway that we observe and is fairly well labeled in our intuitions also. But we are generally, I think, especially as secular kind of modern people, we have much less of an understanding of the possibilities of upward spirals, of, in other words, positive accelerations of positive affect. So glory, I mean, no one really talks about glory anymore. What does it mean exactly? And I think that basically, to put things very, briefly, the religious life is more or less the most long-standing, most well-known pathway or kind of social affective technology for the production of positively accelerating affect. That's basically the argument that I put forward in my last stream, and there's basically a lot of neurobiological evidence to support that, I believe. Damasio talks about it quite explicitly, even though he doesn't necessarily take a religious, angle or implication from it. But of course, he's relying on Spinoza, and Spinoza did, of course, believe in God. He was, very heretical to the religions of the day and treated accordingly, but he did maintain a certain notion of God. So yeah, that's kind of to summarize some of the stuff I talked about in the last stream. But someone asked me about what exactly do I mean by bifurcated affective acceleration, and to talk more about that. So that's kind of what I started to do here, and what I'll do for just a few more minutes before I talk to Antoine. And of course, we can just ask him what he thinks about this stuff too. But the way that I would explain it or go back over it, I actually wrote about, I'm looking at them right now. I wrote about 700 words last night trying to refine this idea. Man, and this is why this setup I'm building on the internet is so fucking great, and I'm so pumped on it. Like making videos, but also writing and also doing podcasts, and then having this private community that's like I'm actually personally connected with on a daily basis and talking with people on a daily basis, like living, like it's a living, breathing kind of smooth space of intellectual production where I just go from one format to the next, getting feedback from other people, and it's just like this. It's so beautiful. That's like I feel like I'm getting closer and closer to kind of my dream state of what a true intellectual life looks like. Anyway, that's just a bit of an aside, but I'm really pumped on it. So I wrote something, and I really was able, I think, to drill down a little bit more schematically and usefully on what I was trying to say in the video. And so basically, in a nutshell, the idea of bifurcated affective acceleration is basically easy to see when you take two ingredients and imagine what happens to them together. So the first one is that the neurobiology of emotion and just biology in general, biology is characterized by nonlinear dynamics. Okay. And whenever you have nonlinear dynamics, whenever there's a nonlinear system, nonlinear meaning, the effect of one unit increase in X leads to a multiplicatively larger effect on some output variable Y. You have these explosive possibilities. Or in the more traditional kind of cybernetic way of putting it, especially when X causes Y, but Y also causes X. That's what I mean by nonlinear dynamics. When when you have complex systems that are characterized by nonlinear dynamics, there's always kind of potentiality for takeoff scenarios, for exponential curves, in other words. So, and I don't think anyone disputes that ultimately biological systems are they're complex systems, and they are characterized by nonlinear dynamics. In particular, and again, this is kind of drawing on Damasio, but I would have to do a little bit more work to extricate this from the text. But I believe it's fair to say that consciousness, human consciousness, is basically the key kind of new evolved addition to biological systems that introduces a new hub of potential nonlinear dynamics. And so basically the idea is that perception, the way your brain functions affects your physiological functioning, obviously, and your physiological functioning affects your brain function. And so long as the way that we distribute our attention and our ideas and our theoretical frameworks and our pictures of the world, so long as that is able to affect, our body states, and our body states affect our ideas, well, consciousness basically introduces this like new possibility for positive and negative kind of exponential takeoff modes in affect, really. So I think that maybe I didn't put it as well as someone out there could, but I think that's not very controversial. I think that's a pretty simple and uncontroversial reading about the basic cybernetic nature and nonlinear nature of biological systems. So you take that as point A, and then the second point is this whole idea behind what we call accelerationism, which is basically focusing on the technological and economic dynamics. If you buy that technological and economic change is occurring now at an exponential rate, that we are in some sort of takeoff mode, whether that be Nick Bostrom's kind of superintelligence takeoff scenarios, or Kurzweil's kind of model of singularity, or whatever. There are different registers for it. But if you take that accelerationist empirical observation seriously, and that's your perspective for where we are in the world right now, then this idea of bifurcated affective acceleration is basically just saying these two things probably interact. And the third, so when you have two nonlinear systems, in other words, two systems where exponential takeoff dynamics are live wires, I'm trying to ask you to think about what happens when the nonlinear processes of our biology, and specifically the neurobiology of our emotion, as laid out by someone like Damasio, what happens when that interacts with accelerating technological and economic change. So that's the basic kind of backdrop idea. And then I would say the final variable to this idea of bifurcated affective acceleration is that, well, it's basically it's stratification. It's basically the idea that different populations, different subpopulations in humanity are going to have different starting points and different basic traits. And so just like with income inequality, like one way to understand income inequality is that people have different skills, different intelligence levels, different temperamental traits, and some of those get rewarded by techonomic advancements that we're seeing right now, and some of them get punished or not rewarded. And so basically, if you are super conscientious and super intelligent, you know how to do things like computer programming really well, you can become a fucking massive millionaire. That's what the economy is for you. That's the way that technological acceleration is interacting with your traits to send you off into this kind of positive economic spiral. But if you are low in conscientiousness or below a certain threshold of intelligence, technological acceleration is completely fucking you, and it's sending you towards, it's sending you into a downward spiral of income losses and debt, and it's bad news economically. All I'm saying is that the same thing is very likely to be happening at the level of affect. And that's what I mean by bifurcated affective acceleration. In other words, technological acceleration appears to be interacting with the neurobiology of emotion. These are two nonlinear systems causing kind of exponential takeoffs, both in positive affect for some people and negative affect for other people. conditional on the baseline traits that different human beings are blessed or cursed with. So yeah, that's I hope it spells out in a little bit more detail this idea I floated in my last stream about what I was calling bifurcated affective acceleration. So as I said, I wrote like 700 words on this last night. I'll try to get this cleaned up and put out somewhere sooner or later, but got a lot of other things going on. So I got to figure out how to like prioritize and order all these different like formats and platforms that I'm kind of trying to work on at one time. I see some questions in the chat. Just hang tight with those. I'm going to bring in Antoine. I'm actually 10 minutes late, so bless him for waiting. I told him I'd send him a link at 8:30, so I'm going to do that now. And so just hang tight. If you want to get a drink of water or use the bathroom or something, now would be a good time so you don't miss a thing. All right. I was pretty happy with that. I think that came out a little bit smoother. It always helps when you write things before you do a stream. But on the other hand, I like the idea of being able to present any idea at the tip of my tongue, whatever I'm most interested in, just being able to basically present it on whatever platform is most immediately at hand, and then working it over on other platforms. And I don't see why you can't start with a stream and then do some writing based on the stream, or start with the writing and then do some stream based on the writing. It's going to kind of get improved dynamically over time regardless. All right. Let me see on Twitter. But yeah, Antoine, I think that's how you pronounce it. He might correct me. It's like Antoine, but it's got a J in it. So I'm not sure if that's got some interesting different pronunciation, but seems like a cool cat. As I said, I don't really know that much about him. So I'm curious to ask him a little bit about himself. But he seems like a cool guy. He's been in touch with me for quite a while. So and he's also he's in this community that I've started, so that's cool. I'm getting to know him better. All right, let's see. Antoine, where are you at? Antoine. I hope he's listening to this. If you're listening to this, Antoine, I just sent you the link on Twitter. So go there. Figures that Discord is updating right now, so it's not letting me send it through that. All right, everyone, hang tight and think about what you want to ask Antoine. He seems like he's got this interesting idea. He's got a few different interesting ideas. I'll kind of give him an introduction before he gets here. One idea he's written about that he's run by me is he's interested in alternative ways of measuring skills. So basically he has this theory, and I think it's completely uncontroversial, that the way that we measure skills and knowledge right now today is totally fucked. And that basically things like a college diploma, a university diploma or something like that is an extremely poor representation or measurement of the skills that people actually have, and that you could actually just design a really sophisticated test for different subjects. It's pretty, I mean, it's not super sophisticated or like, genius novel invention. It's a pretty basic idea, but I think it makes a lot of sense and it addresses like a specific problem. You could design like a really optimized test that's free and open source, and if it can be validated and shown to be highly predictive of outcomes and success or whatever, or validated in any other way that would be accurate and compelling. All right, there he is. Antoine, can you hear me all right? Oh, hang on. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. By the way, am I saying your name right? Do you say Antoine or what?
It's Antoine. I'm
Antoine,
glad there's a J in it. It's kind of unnecessary, but
where does that come from? Like, what's the background or heritage of that?
my mom is a she wanted to get really creative, so
Oh,
she
cool.
uh she just threw a J in there. Yeah.
Gotcha. Cool. No worries. I was just curious. I just want to make sure I wasn't fucking it up.
No, I mean you were on point. A lot of people have messed it up before. I had a lot of teachers do that. You were spot on.
What, they just assume you're supposed to say like Antjuan or something?
Yeah, it's got to be like, oh, there's a capital J. It must be more eccentric than a typical Antoine. Yeah.
Cool. Well, Antoine, it's great to like talk with you face to face. Face to face in some way. I was just telling my I was just telling my audience that oh, Antoine, I'm hearing from the audience that your microphone is low. Can you turn that up by any chance or get
I
closer to it
will
or whatever?
see what I can do. How about now?
Sounds louder to me, I think. Stream, can you confirm that chat box rather? Can you confirm that it is louder? Well, anyway, if you can't hear Antoine, just write another message in the chat and I'll tell him to increase it more. Anyway, yeah, it's great to like interact with you face to face. You and I have been in communication for some time. I was just telling listeners, and I was also kind of giving you a little bit of an introduction, kind of just telling them in simple terms some of the stuff you've shared with me. But before we get into that, if you don't mind, I'm just genuinely curious to know a little bit more about you. Would you mind like sharing, just telling us a little bit about like who you are and what's your story or whatever?
Um,
You don't have
honestly,
to. We can just skip to the meaty stuff if you prefer.
media stuff. I don't know what's like worth telling, because I don't consider myself to be that interesting. So I'm like, what? I can't just. I could give you a 30-minute monologue, but like,
Okay,
yeah,
then let me. I'll help you with this then. Are you're in the U.S.? Is that right?
yes, I'm in Indiana right now.
Okay, cool. That's one thing I was just curious about. I'm always just curious, like where the hell people even are. Cool, cool. And how old are you? Do you mind?
I'm 21.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nice, nice. That's young. Yeah. I mean, it's also hard to ask these sorts of questions because just like you don't want to go off on like a super long tangent about stuff that you feel like is not interesting about yourself. I think it's kind of like I want to get to know people, but I don't want to. People on the internet are sometimes really sensitive about like their anonymity, and people don't want to divulge. Some people like don't want to divulge like personal details, but I get the impression from you you're like just a normal guy, kind of. Is that right?
Yeah, you could ask me anything. I don't know. Like to me, I'm super normal. So I'm like, I don't know. I'm gonna tell you about my warehouse job. Like I don't. That's
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Wait. So I'm hearing from the public chat that you're still too soft. Can you boost the
okay.
volume? Or I think what you might want to do is you click. Oh, can you talk? Oh.
Yes.
Okay. Hang on. Now I'm giving feedback. So okay, here's what we need to do. Can you pause your mic when you're not talking?
Hmm. Uh, yeah, I'll give that a go.
Is your mic off now? All right, perfect. So you see, if your mic is on, then what happens is my voice enters your mic. You know what I'm saying? And then it's bad for everyone. But as long as your mic is off and only you turn your mic on when you're talking, then we're good. All right. Cool. So yeah, it's kind of annoying. You're just gonna have to remember to hit the button before you talk. So cool. So you're 21 years old. So that's pretty young. And for like a 21-year-old, you have some interesting and fairly sophisticated ideas about kind of re-engineering different systems. So I'm just curious, like maybe like how did you get into as such a young man? Like how did you get into these highfalutin, like ideas about, you know, creating new different social experiments and programming systems and stuff like that? Like what's maybe just tell us what's your background with like your intellectual background in whatever words you want to describe that.
I've always been really. Uh, I just kind of let myself go down rabbit holes. I try not to restrict whatever. Like if I'm interested in something, I'll just dive as deep as I can into that. and you just over time you develop techniques for kind of accumulating really deep understandings of stuff. I've never been like if I was interested in physics, I would never be like, I don't know if I'm qualified to understand physics. I would just like just dive in. And
so are you like in university, or did you even go to university, or what?
I am probably about to drop out.
Oh, really?
I graduated, a couple years ago. I tried to make this social media app, and I ended up getting connected with some investors, and they basically told me that they couldn't trust anything that I thought of because I hadn't gone to like a prestigious school or something. I had no clout to back up this stuff that I was talking about.
Wait, so you finished high school and then you made an app?
Yeah. Well, I tried to make an app. I designed. Yeah, sure. I kind of apply this sort of like complex systems understanding to like reverse engineering products from markets, and then decided that an app was something that needed to exist, or what I was trying to do.
Okay, fascinating. So apparently, yeah, you're very creative, obviously super intelligent young man, quite ahead of his peers in many obvious ways, just from knowing you. That's very obvious. But so tell me about your views toward university. So you're currently enrolled, but you're thinking about dropping out. Is that right? Or what? How did you come to that view?
Yes, I'm currently enrolled at Harvard Extension School, and I'm thinking about dropping out mainly just because I don't think that it fits my sort of way of approaching information. Having this really kind of structured approach towards, obviously I know how I learn better than, any sort of currently created format for approaching information is actually suited to address. So yeah, and then I was just really, really unsatisfied with like how Harvard is doing things. So I wanted to drop out, but I didn't. I needed to make sure that I wasn't just trying to shirk my responsibilities. So that's when I what ended up becoming the paper for the segmented credentials that I had sent in our little group chat community.
Right.
And yeah, and now I'm probably going to actually try to do that, because it's I think I actually may have thought of something decent while going through that.
Yeah, awesome. That's really cool. So I can understand now a little bit more personal background about how you got into thinking about credentials. I mean, for what it's worth, I'll just say very briefly, I think higher education as we know it is completely fucked. And I think for many people, it's quite a rational decision to try to take a stab at building their life and their projects outside of the system if it's possible, for sure. Do you know Brian Kaplan's argument, the economist Brian Kaplan, who recently wrote a book called The Case Against Education? Basically, yeah, you probably got a kick out of it. Basically, it's pretty a scathing indictment of education, and basically his argument is that education as we know it is mostly a big wasteful signaling game, and that it actually has nothing to do with education. He goes over all this data that shows that education as we know it, it doesn't actually increase your skills or give you like marketable, valuable, human capital for jobs in terms of skills or anything like that. Like, people generally don't learn that much. It doesn't actually translate into what it's supposed to translate, but it is correlated with increased income, and it does get you jobs and stuff like that, but only as a signaling mechanism. So basically, it's just this super, super expensive way to prove that you already were pretty intelligent and already were pretty conscientious, and so that people can trust hiring you. So it's a pretty remarkable and scathing argument, because it shows that, like, for some people, higher education is necessary to, as you kind of demonstrate, as you said in your own personal experience, like, it is a powerful way to prove to people that you have certain traits, but the education itself doesn't give you those traits. There's precious little evidence that the education itself gives you anything. It's really just rubber stamping what you already have, but it's a fucking really expensive, time wasting, and also quite torturous way to prove that sort of stuff. Like for a really smart young person such as yourself, who's creative and able to do stuff already, you know, university is just like a torturous waste of your brain power on like an almost endless or it feels like an endless, you know, stream of exercises and arbitrary responsibilities and jumping through hoops and stuff like that. So yeah, man, it wasn't that long ago that I was in university, so I feel you.
Yeah, you seem like more open and like you seem like unorthodox enough in your thinking to have been like, you know what, kind of screw this whole thing. But you're not. You're a tenured professor now, so
Right. But Antoine, I mean, honestly, like I'm kind of the professor version of you because, you know, like I got into you know, whatever. I've gone over my story enough. People know it, but I've like landed in academia with a pretty good position that a lot of people like compete really hard for. But now I'm in it and I'm just like 80% of the stuff that I have to do for this job has nothing to do with seeking truth, has nothing to do with creating new valuable things. It has nothing to do even with educating students. And so it's like, just like you're looking around at like your university experience and you're like, I got to get the fuck out of here. This is just not for me. To be honest, that's kind of like the state I'm in with respect to academia. And that's why I'm just kind of like, again, I think we probably have the second thing in common too, which is that to deal with this, we've just turned to the internet and just kind of like trying to find interesting, smart people who are open-minded and willing to not really care that much about credentials and prestige and just try to find interesting shit to work on and to make the next big moves and solve problems and stimulate and edify ourselves. So yeah, cool. That's really interesting to hear about your background and everything. So maybe this would be a good time then we could just jump right in. Do you want to tell people about that idea? I was kind of introducing it before you got on. I was describing it as you have some ideas for, I was calling it like knowledge or skills measurement. That's more effective than something like higher education. But I think you just used the phrase segmented credentials. Do you want to just maybe share with the audience, like, what is your idea there?
yes. So basically, I think
And
that
speak up a little bit more if you can.
Okay. So yes, basically, I think that there. So you could break every discipline down into a sub-discipline, and then each sub-discipline into some, I guess you could call micro-disciplines, and then you could. It doesn't seem like unfeasible to be able to construct a, just to get a lot of questions for each like micro-discipline, and then you could have people just select which micro disciplines they want to have their knowledge tested in, and then you could test all that in some pretty robust ways, I think, and that would give you like hyper precise estimations of people's skills that you just can't get from a diploma, because a diploma, like say Eric Weinstein, like he may have, let's say modal logic or something. He may be the best person in the world in some aspect that he just cannot have verified and can't even convince anybody of, because it wouldn't even be believable if he was actually at that skill level. And I think the world benefits from creating a test that could function like that. So yeah, right now it's called, in the paper that I had sent to you guys, it was titled segmented credentials, but now I'm calling it the no ledger, which is like a ledger of knowledge. I thought that was a fun pun.
Nice.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So it's basically, it's, as I was saying before you got here, it's pretty simple. Like it's potentially, if you could implement it and it were to take off, it would be very profound. But the idea is not that complicated. It's basically just currently we have these very unwieldy generic measurements of general skill levels and stuff like that. But actually there's a lot of variation, and maybe someone is super good at some specific thing, but there's no, and your proposal is let's just have knowledge measurements for a large number of highly refined aptitudes. So then people can prove that they have those skills, and people can be, can get opportunities for having those very unique skills. Is that right?
Yes, that's exactly it. I think, even if like I think everybody benefits from that. Like autodidacts that have self-taught themselves a really high level of understanding or something. They could benefit. People like Eric Weinstein that may be just preposterously good at certain aspects of particular disciplines.
Right. And do you want to maybe say a few words about how you imagine implementing this? You said that this is actually what you want to work on concretely right now. What's your game plan, or how do you envision it?
First, it would cost me a lot of money to get that test created. I think I would probably need to hire like 40 people or something.
Well,
So maybe at least like 12. So I'm thinking about dropping a website, which I'm going to call no/net.org. And it's going to have like basically a map of that discipline structure that I was outlining, where you go to the website. Well, it's going to start off as a directory for so there already exists a directory for textbooks, and I was just going to make it so that people can interact with this academic discipline web and just select whatever disciplines or micro disciplines or sub-disciplines that they want to learn from. And yeah, then the website will just auto-compile all the textbooks related to those different disciplines. And then there'd be like a forum on the website for people to talk to. I think that would be a good start to kind of, just empowering like
right.
learners and whatnot.
Right. I could see that. Do you think maybe it would make sense to start small with like one domain or something, and as a proof of concept, and then when, if that could take off, or you could prove that it works well, then maybe scale it out from there or something?
So I would start, I want to, as of right now, I want to start with that sort of interactable, if I'm saying that right, interactable academic discipline web. And because there already exists a directory of textbooks. All I need to do is to make a website that can direct people to whichever textbook that they want to really easily. And I don't think that's that difficult to do. The test, I'm nowhere near capable of even implementing a small fraction of that test. And I don't even think it'd be useful being only working for very small aspects. So right now, I don't think that actually implementing the interactable knowledge web is that too big of a hurdle to jump.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah, we talked about that in the chat. I definitely think it's a very worthwhile problem to aim at, for sure, because it's definitely an issue. I mean, we definitely have very poor measurements of skills and knowledge, and that are both poor and also so costly and wasteful in how they actually operate. So I definitely applaud that, and I definitely think you're onto like a strong idea about how it might look to solve it. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I mean, if there's any angel investors in my public chat for my live stream, send Antoine a message. Unfortunately, Antoine, I find it unlikely that there are many people listening to this right now who are like multi-million-dollar investors, but you never know. Maybe they know someone. So who knows? The internet works in strange ways, man. You never know. Thanks for sharing that. You never know where this video might find itself.
I think that, it's probably unlikely that will happen, but it's nice to, because like you've provided like really good feedback to like some of the ideas that were bouncing around. So I think it's good for me, good for whatever this ends up becoming, that a bunch of people get together and start thinking about it.
Right, for sure. Actually, I'm glad you said that, because we have some interesting, kind of slightly challenging questions for you in the chat, which I guess I can send you real quick. So first, Neural Shroud says he's not sure he gets it. He or she is not sure that they get it. What's the difference between your idea and regular tests certifications on narrow subjects? Well, I don't want to answer for you, but go on.
Precision and uniform standards.
Precision and uniform standards. Probably also like just quantity, like increasingly refined specific tests for different specific skills.
There's a way to I think that there's a way to construct it. Like you could, I could make if there was some way that I could fund people I could produce a financial incentive to
construct questions for these tests at you know, very valid questions, then you could have a test that has way more items and can be way more precise than any test that currently exists, because think about how many pages of paper you might need, or and even if these tests do exist for like, I think if you're in like the medical field or something, there's a test that's very similar to what I'm talking about, but that a test of that quality does not exist for every possible discipline or sub-discipline. And even if it did, I don't think that there's a current place that stores anything like what would be all of those scores.
Right. Okay. And so Michael says, he talks about Kaplan's book, and he says that what Brian Kaplan finds is that certification tests are not as valuable to employers as university degrees, precisely because the degrees take so long to get, that the what they really convey is that you're willing to stick with something, you're willing and able to stick with something, through a long period of difficult work. So that's like conscientiousness, really. So it's like, what employers want, the objection here would be, what employers want is not just accurate measurements of skill levels, but they actually want to know that you're able to fight through confusing and complicated and frustrating challenges over a long period of time. And that's what university degrees effectively signal. So have you thought about that?
I don't think that I think that there's a very large difference in the output of someone that's performing at the 99.99 percentile of in any discipline than there is someone who's at the 75 percentile with a lot of discipline.
It's a good point.
The certain person at the extremely high skill level, like Elon Musk, if he was half as lazy, if he was half as disciplined as he is now, he would still be outthinking, regular folk that work really, really hard.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's a credible answer. Like, I think what you're saying is that finding the needle in the haystack, finding the people that are in the 99th percentile of any particular profitable skill, or skill that's needed in a business, the value gained by finding those needles in the haystack that are currently being not found is enough to outweigh perhaps like the perhaps unpredictable nature of their conscientiousness levels. Is that one way to understand what you're saying?
Yes. Like, I mean, if you could take there's like pretty large variations in, I hope there are pretty large variations in like processing speed. So if you work twice as hard as I do, but I think 7 times as quick as you do, then there's the difference in our output is going to be ridiculous.
Yeah. I think that's a very credible answer. So good one on that. What I would also add maybe is that you could make the argument that actually the changing nature of the economy today actually is reducing the significance of that 4-year conscientiousness test, because so much labor is increasingly flexible, short-term contracts, So it's like, if you need someone who's like a super genius at modal logic, just to continue with your example, Antoine, you might only need to pay them on a, short-term basis for particular like challenges that your company goes. So you can imagine like, freelance sites for like people with really high skills on all these, high skill levels on all these very specific arcane skills. And maybe they're only being paid to do 1 day's worth of work at a time or something like that. And so that would actually decrease their need for assurances about, someone's ability to follow through on a 4-year project. Like, 4-year projects are increasingly unheard of, in the economy today. So that's one thing maybe that ameliorates that objection to your argument. But yeah, go on.
Yes, I think so. And also, I think that once you provide an incentive for trying to cultivate unusual sets of skills, then you start to see more uses for unusual sets of skills. So, having a combination of very being like very skillful in like modal logic or whatever, and also some obscure subfield of biology might actually be useful. It might be way more useful than we think. And once you give people a reason to actually cultivate those skills, I think we start seeing stuff like this.
Right, that's true. Also, interesting combinations of skills. Because like some people today will get certifications in a particular domain, but few people have like multiple certifications because they usually require like sufficient commitments that if you want to get certified in like, I don't know, like occupational therapy or something like that, it's time consuming and difficult and long term of a challenge enough that you're not also going to get some certification in like biology or modal logic or something like that. That's kind of like prohibitively costly, but it stands to reason that unique intersections of skills are also uniquely valuable to employers. So that would be also something that your system might be able to provide.
Yes, and I also think that really good point though. I think I lost that thought.
No, that's okay. That's cool. There are some interesting comments in the chat, but that's Neural Shroud, who's also in our little community. So I kind of want to move on to the other stuff we wanted to talk about. So Neural Shroud, I'm gonna skip some of those comments, but just copy and paste them and post them in the Discord. Cool. So let's talk about your other ideas about what you call sustainism. And basically, the way that I kind of describe this in the description for this stream is that I think you and I are both kind of interested in how to engineer different types of social technologies, I guess you could say, for producing and sustaining community or collective life, a meaningful life more generally. So you've given a lot of thought to this. Do you want to, in your own words, tell us about your model of what you call sustainism?
Yeah, hopefully I can do it justice because I only just wrote that thing like 2 days ago, and it was really hard to write.
That's cool. Yeah, that's my style too. So just always writing and always talking about the half-baked ideas that are at the tip of my tongue, but for that reason that I'm most passionate about. So yeah, feel free to take your time and go in any direction you want. And if it's a little bit, elliptical, that's fine. Just let us know what you're thinking.
I basically think that there are actions that aren't. So I think that any action that cannot be repeated is so the most meaningless. Okay.
That's okay.
Right, so
it's okay.
Yeah. If your action doesn't cause the species to, or not really the species, some sort of aware being to be affected by it. Okay, if you're doing something that can't be repeated, as in it causes the end of a civilization or something, or it causes the end of everything, which may be lying. If you're propagating disinformation, then you could you would likely be negatively affecting people's ability to interact with reality. And if no one can interact with reality properly, then you will, everybody dies. I don't think that we can like haphazard, we can mistaken. I don't think we can survive forever on accident. So, and if what you're doing isn't it's in no way serving the amplification of, it's in no way assisting being persisting for forever, then it's probably a meaningless action. So it may even be, I would say that it's immoral, because the most if good and bad are opposites, then if good and bad are opposites and bad is worse than good, then the worst situation that could possibly exist is one that doesn't allow for any future good scenarios.
Okay, so, I think so. Reading your document that you sent me, I think or at least what I kind of got from it, one of the ways of interpreting that I got from it is you seem to think that it's like the idea that living a meaningful life, or like living and acting in a way that is meaningful, is not just a kind of like nice and desirable feature of your own life, something that you should try to do, and it's good for you, and you'll enjoy life better if you do it. But I think you're kind of trying to make the argument that you're ethically obligated to act in the way that is most meaningful to you, or something like that.
Yes, you are. I think that is the you could, because I think you only feel meaningful when you feel useful, and the most meaningful action that you could have would probably be one that would be one that is likely to be useful for all living beings for forever. I feel like this is probably sounding like super ridiculous. But
no, it's okay. I mean, it's the internet. We're just talking. Yeah. It's okay to sound ridiculous. It's fun even. So what I would say, okay, here's maybe what I would bounce back then is something I've always thought about is that, like, obviously one of the major problems in politics is that people disagree. And like the reason that there's so much social conflict is, I mean, there are lots of reasons, obviously, but one reason is because there are just genuine and profound disagreements about different things, about, you know, how you want the political community to be organized. There are deep and substantial and reasonable disagreements. Like, people have fundamentally different views about how we should organize collective life that affects us all. And so that's an obvious source of political conflict. And also people have different temperaments, different personalities, right? People want different things. People see things differently, whatever. You get the idea. This is a source of extraordinary strife. But I guess something that a certain kind of gist I kind of felt from your writing that also kind of resonates with something I've been thinking about, and I'll just kind of try to give a stylized version of perhaps the idea halfway between us, and you can comment however you want, is that, like, there need to be principles there need to be ethical principles that are true. Like there is a truth about how human beings should behave. There are some principles that exist, very likely, or we should try to find principles that are objectively true for what is the best way to live. What is the objectively the best way to conduct yourself, and those ideally could and would be grounded in objective reality. But my sense has always been that those truths, like ethical truths, which I do believe in. I do believe in ethical truths that are objectively hold on all people. There is a wild amount of there's a wild amount of variance in how people might interpret them. And that's okay. To me, it's like the way that people might interpret ethical rules differently is where the difference and the variance in people's temperament and their disagreements and whatnot. Like, people can have their disagreements, like fundamental, deeply embedded differences and disagreements. But as long as they're attuned sincerely and genuinely to ethical truths that are objectively true, then the truth of that kind of shared interpersonal, intersubjective ethical reality, because everyone is attuned to that true reality of proper ethical conduct, it will kind of have a natural way of facilitating and coordinating all of the difference and the variance to be ultimately salutary and cooperative and beneficial for all. So does that jive with anything you think? So I'll give you.
It depends on how you use truth. I would hate to, go Jordan Peterson on you, but I think that the truest thing that could exist is something that is accurate, regardless of subjective interpretation. Like, there's
right.
So
yeah,
if someone has a different perspective on what is you know, ethically true, then they aren't. If two people have different perspectives on what is ethically true, then one of them likely isn't understanding the truth correctly.
I agree with that. I agree with that.
And I think that the actions that are most ethical would probably. So you're saying there'd be like a synergy between possible, the behaviors that would result from different interpretations of.
I guess
truth.
what I'm trying to say is that what we would ideally have is ethical principles that can be interpreted in different ways according to temperamental interpersonal differences. But even with that variance in the interpretation and the application, the attunement to the ethical principle is enough to be socially functional. And so to give you an example, for instance, like you mentioned that you're also you would be interested in possibly talking about like religion as a connection to this. Like this is kind of how I see the genius of Catholicism. Like a lot of people think that Catholicism is this like very austere, authoritarian, kind of like brutally dogmatic, kind of like unified ideological edifice, this set of beliefs that you have to believe, and that everyone has to say that they agree with, a list of very specific dogmatic beliefs. And if you don't, then you're like punished in all different types of ways on earth and in the afterlife or whatever. And I think that's the impression a lot of people have of Catholicism as a very austere kind of dogmatic religion. But I've always seen it very differently. And this is maybe the backdrop for what I was just talking about in terms of ethics, because the austere dogmatic accountability that one is held to in Catholicism, like you do have to affirm a small list of pretty clear kind of authoritarian ethical statements. Basically, you can think of them as that. But as long as you're able, as long as you can just affirm those, then you're kind of free to live in all different types of variants. Like you're allowed to think all different types of other things on the other lower questions, the lower questions of life. As long as you're able to affirm high level ethical principles that everyone is going to say they're going to hold themselves accountable to and that they agree with, and those are going to be operative and enforced. And that's key. Like there's going to be enforcement of high level dogmatic ethical principles. Then on the lower levels of the rung of like how you want to kind of think and speak and live and talk about politics or talk about society or talk about personality or whatever, you can do all of that stuff with a lot of variance. And the reason you can get away with that variance and the reason you can still have peaceful overarching solidarity and community, despite all the lower level variance and different temperaments and stylistic life decisions or whatever, is precisely because of that kind of harsh, austere, enforced agreement at the top. So that's kind of my intuition here, is that like there should exist like objectively grounded ethical principles, a small number of them that everyone can kind of agree to and enforce on each other. But because of that, then people can have a lot of freedom and autonomy to express that or interpret that with a lot of latitude, in some sense. Does that make? That's I guess that's kind of what I think, I guess.
Yes, that definitely fits in to what I was trying to get at. I do think that I think that, like, if I could sum everything up, I think that the most ethical thing that you could do would be to do whatever it is that you can do that is as best, that is the most in service to like potential action. So if that happens, like that could be different things based on temperament. So if I'm just more into music or you're more into writing, I might be ethically obligated to fulfill fulfill my capacity as a musician, like to become a Diplo, and you might be more ethically obligated to become a Shakespeare or something, because
right,
that's the ripple effects of that throughout time are like so good that it's
right. So okay, now we're on the same page then for sure. Have you ever read Spinoza?
Nope.
Well, so that's basically one of Spinoza's ideas. Or you should read Spinoza if you want to. You'd find a lot of vindication in Spinoza. And actually, this book that I've been raving about lately, this book by Antonio Damasio, called "Looking for Spinoza," that might even be a more fun thing for you to read before Spinoza, because it's basically he's a neuroscientist and specifically a neurobiologist of emotions, and his book is basically a scientific vindication of Spinoza. And what he talks about is kind of the punchline of the book is that joy, the feeling of joy, which Spinoza called like a feeling of the power to act, basically, which is like language very close to what you were just naturally using, the power to act. Joy is the experience of an increase in your power to act, basically, in Spinoza. And Damasio shows that this is an emotion which reflects ideal or optimal like body states, basically. Like you feel joy when your mind's map of your body reflects its highest level of healthy, smooth functioning and potentiality. In other words, you feel joy neurobiologically. You feel joy because, and this is an evolved, response. You feel it as a function of your physiological power to act being at its highest. So basically, Damasio has basically shown through all this research, him and his colleagues and other related scholars, Damasio basically paints the empirical story of how Spinoza was right, basically. And so, yeah, you would find, I think you might find that interesting.
Yeah, I think I would like that a lot. It sounds like very close to what I was trying to get at.
But I think what it comes down to, and this is, I think, something you and I agree on, is that you're kind of basically saying that you have an ethical obligation to maximize your own joy. Is that fair to say? Because what gives you the greatest power to act, and what gives other,
it depends on whether or not, because it is possible, I think, that you could, a serial killer may take great joy in just slaughtering people. He may be ethically obligated to not do the thing that it gives him the most happiness.
Well, here's what's tricky. I don't know, because I do think that joy is a pretty specific kind of neurobiological state, and like people do things for different reasons.
Yeah, I think I definitely misinterpreted you for a second there, just then.
No, it's okay. No, it's actually a good point, because I think that's a very kind of common objection, I think, to what I'm saying, is that like people can't, just doing what you want to do can't be the criterion for ethical action, right? Obviously, like that's naive for the reason you said. Like maybe people feel like what gives them joy is murdering someone or something like that. But I think what's useful about the empirical background is that, there are pretty precise like neurological correlates to these things. And so I'm pretty sure you could specify like neuroscientifically, like what a serial killer gets from like his next victim is something different than joy. I think. I'm not sure about that at all, but I think that might be true. That's conjecture. I should qualify it.
You might be right there. I think that joy is kind of like, maybe that's a poorly chosen word for what he was describing, because it just seems way too easy for someone to hear you saying these things and come back with the interpretation that I just came back with. Like fulfillment might be a better word for that, but joy.
Right. Well, okay. Here. Let me change gears a little bit, because I had a thought that I got listening to a minute ago. I just want to double back to, which is related, but it's kind of coming from a different angle. I've had this hypothesis for some time now that this is kind of reversing what we've been saying, thinking about it from from like a reversal of terms. But another way you could say what I think we're both saying is that if people are genuinely doing what they believe in, and they're doing that genuinely, and their perceptions are well calibrated with reality, and they're also being true to their conscience, if that is the case, then all different people in their various temperaments and languages and perspectives and tendencies will, in the long run, tend to converge toward like a shared objective ethical truths. So that's kind of like before I was going from the top down, but now I'm going from the bottom up. Do you think that that's a true claim? I think that's kind of consistent with what you're writing. I thought.
Yes, I definitely think that's true. I think that that I can't imagine that not causing some sort of like stable society or
Yeah,
ethical
yeah,
values.
that's right. I think the tricky thing is, I think the tricky thing here is that like only individuals know if they're being true to themselves, maybe, and even individuals don't know. It's hard to know. Like there's not really a good way that we know of to socially enforce, to monitor and measure and enforce, like if someone is being true to themselves. There might be though. I don't know.
I think if you just be like, hey, you're not true to themselves, you're not living up to your potential. I think that the joy that you're describing is very much a emotional reaction to fulfilling of capacity to act or something like that. Or is that even a coherent? Yeah, close enough to what I was trying to say. But,
yeah, definitely. Well, but I guess the thing, like the trouble is that in a human society, there are substantial numbers of people who actively want to act in like ways that are destructive even for themselves. You know what I mean? So it's like there are all of these kind of pressures tending towards bitterness and resentment and like self-destructive ways of like coping basically with life and its challenges. And they're not necessarily hurting people, but they're definitely like in their failure to maximize their own joy and their failure to do available actions that would give them more power. They're kind of doing it's kind of unethical. Like it's almost an unethical disservice to the world and to your community to like willfully hang on to like a lower level of joy than you're capable of. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought that's an impression I got from like what you were trying to say. I wasn't sure though. I think that. Yeah.
But I'm not sure if these like the people in these emotional people that aren't living up to the amount of joy that they're capable of, that could be because they're not they have an inaccurate view of their capabilities. So they think that they should be doing a lot more than they are. So then they can so what were the three things that you named earlier? Like if they are true to their conscience, if they're could you just go through those again?
Yeah, I think I said two things. I think one being like conscience, it would be like the internal kind of phenomenological measure that maybe only individuals have access to for themselves, but we all have a sense of like when we're true or false to our conscience, I think. But that would be one dimension, and then the other was like accurate perceptions of reality.
Yes,
So like people can just have skewed pictures of the world.
Yeah, I think this may also just be conjecture too, but I think that people going through these like resentful, bitter stages are likely have poor poor understandings of reality or how reality could unfold. And that's somehow, I couldn't imagine someone both having an accurate view of reality and being true to their conscience and not behaving in ways that are like upcycling their ability to act. So one of those has to be off.
Yeah. Okay. So then I think we are kind of on the same page then. Could you tell us more about what you just said, this idea of upcycling? What do you mean by that?
So you could think of like recycling as like returning back to zero. It's not creating waste. It's a thing's back to fulfilling the the function that it was before you started tampering with it. And you could say upcycling as if there's a way that I can convert waste into something that was doing more than what it was before. And there's like it basically comes down to like synergies between things. Like there's a way I can talk to you in a way that causes you to talk to me in a way that gets us both better at talking in general.
Yeah.
So
Okay. Got it.
that's upcycling our ability to talk.
Right. So that's that's very similar to, I like that word upcycle. That's a kind of more efficient and I think more succinct way of saying something that I have a tendency to mince words about. Like before you came on the chat, I was kind of giving a little bit of a spiel about this idea that I kind of articulated a few days ago about what I've been calling affective acceleration. But basically, it's just the idea that there are pathways for the kind of upward spiral or downward spiral of emotions, of affect, and of basically, yeah, emotional energies, like that are well specified, neuroscientifically and neurobiologically. And yeah, so like I it seems to me that human beings are capable of bootstrapping themselves into like rapidly accelerating positive affect, which is joy and which is the power to act. And they're also capable of falling into downward spirals of rapidly decreasing affect, which leads to just like collective bitterness and violence and suicide and stuff like that. So does that jive with what you're saying?
100%.
Yeah.
Maybe downcycling would be the
right
the word for that.
So could you tell me a little bit about what you think? By the way, I think this live stream, I wasn't going to run too long tonight because I think I'm going to go see a movie. It's late here, and I've had this thing going where I like to see movies late at night on like Tuesdays because they're cheap on Mondays and Tuesdays. So maybe we'll wrap this up in just like 10 minutes or so. But I would be curious to know, because clearly you've been thinking about these things a lot, and the document you shared with me about Sustainedism is very interested in. You're interested, just like I am, in how we as creative human beings can just sort of like engineer or create situations amongst ourselves autonomously to bootstrap ourselves into this sort of like these positive spirals of what I've been calling affective accelerationism. Could you say a few words about like the way you see it as to how like communities can bootstrap themselves into this kind of positively upward spiraling potential power?
I think it's just you just have to have a devotion towards the betterment or the empowerment of being. So there's if that could be your own empowerment, that could be someone else's, that could be you empowering someone else to develop capacities to empower themselves and other people. But I think it's just as simple as not like propagating like destructive behavior or something. Like you're just on top of getting everybody better, and if everyone's doing that, then everything gets better, I think.
Right. Fair enough. Well, I've been thinking a lot about, maybe I could tell you a little bit more about one of my crazy ideas, and you can kind of tell me if it sounds insane or smart, or you can object if you want to whatever. Like, I'm really interested in, I guess I've always had this idea that if you get like a handful of people together, and you not just kind of like, as you were saying, like live well and live appropriately, and in a way that's meaningful and in line with your conscience, and also accurately calibrated with reality. Like you were saying, like, I agree with you that as long as people are basically doing that, things will go in a good direction. But I've always been kind of especially interested in how, like, could you, if you got really serious about this and got really clever and even a little bit like kooky with it, like, could you go balls to the wall and engineering a kind of like pressure cooker that would do all of this stuff in a kind of like rapidly accelerating way? So like, for instance, I mean, this is gonna sound like really sketchy, but I've always been interested in cults for this reason, because it seems to me like the cult is like, it's taking the technology of religion and it's kind of like hacking it. It's kind of, it's reverse engineering like religion as you know it, and making the technology kind of available to small groups. But the cult to me has always been basically like a social technology that has appeared throughout human history, where basically small groups say to themselves, like, let's design like totally different ideas relative to the mainstream society, which is like filled with all these errors, filled with all these lies, filled with all these unethical tendencies. and just inertia and bitterness and all the crap that's associated with like a massive complex society. And let's like just amongst ourselves in an open source kind of way. Well, historically that hasn't been how it's worked. There's usually like a charismatic leader who like fucks everything up historically. But to me, the larger idea that it's pointing to is like, in principle, a small group could get together and basically like design some ethical principles, design some mantras, if you will, like some principles that everyone can kind of like feel and buy into. And then like more seriously or more comprehensively perhaps than is normal, everyone kind of attunes their speech and their behavior to the maximization of joy or whatever you want to call it at all costs. And I guess my hypothesis is that if everyone is doing that, and you do it in this kind of like highly concentrated, focused way that is designed or engineered precisely to do that and nothing else, and you're willing to take the risk of being like weird, you know, relative to everyone else in society who will inevitably see this as like ridiculous or insane, that's basically a cult. And cults do have well-documented capacities for like for definitely taking off. Like, it's well documented that if you do this sort of thing, it absolutely can work in fucking skyrocketing human beings, groups of human beings, into like ecstatic, energetic, joyful social communion and energy and creative productivity and well-being, at least on a certain trajectory, until like the horrible things that happen, which always inevitably happen in history. But I guess my crazy idea is that there might just be another iteration of this like cult technology, the social technology, which is basically just religion but hacked, that if you could, and the key innovation would be having fail safes that like prevent the well-known bad tendencies. So like for instance, like the charismatic leader who convinces everyone to like fuck him and then like take like a cyanide pill or something like that. Like if you could have ways to kind of guarantee that stuff doesn't happen through engineering innovations, then I think you could imagine like cults basically that figure out a way to bootstrap themselves into like infinite, joyous, energetic satisfaction and contentment and creative productivity for social good. Tell me why I'm insane for imagining that as possible.
Because I think that that increase in, let's say, joy it's tied in. It's happening because there's positive reinforcement for actions that help out the group. But if all that's coming from is from maybe social dynamics, and maybe you end up maximizing for just group adherence, and then that causes like a society that can't possibly cohere with other societies, especially not if different groups have different dynamics, then these cults are not going to jive. So
you're talking about inter-cult conflict.
Or not, yeah, maybe intra might be the
intra, and then at the end you also mentioned inter-cult. So yeah,
so these like two cults cannot, like, I think it's very easy to imagine of two cults that aren't they've within the cult they've both reached like new heights of maybe creativity, productivity, well-being, all that. But once these cults cross paths, then, or even if there isn't a cult, even if there isn't another cult, like because this upcycling of action is so dependent upon social reinforcement, if someone doesn't like that won't be sustainable with another society that isn't reinforcing those behaviors.
Okay.
So there has to be like an incentive structure that isn't purely just social reinforcement. So maybe that's money, but I don't know.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair criticism. I mean, I guess I hear two things.
That made sense. I don't.
Yeah, it did. I mean, I kind of hear two criticisms in what you're saying. One is that like groups, just the nature of group psychology is such that the internal problems of like, if you try to bootstrap something by leveraging group psychology, then you're inevitably just going to get run away like in-group tribalism that will veer off in harmful ways, whether you like it or not. Because if the group is only anchored to itself, then it can only ultimately go in some sort of like destructive way that it's unable to calibrate itself away from. So okay, I'll think about that. But and then your other comment is that kind of has to do with like how this group would interact with other groups, and it wouldn't go well.
There's actually no way. I think that the only way to this is just kind of an idea.
Sure. Go for it.
I think that positive synergies only happen from consistent positive synergies can't happen if you just have a bunch of things that are exactly the same. So there's no, I can't see a justification. There's no. So let's go into
you need difference from the outside to enter in as kind of like productive stimulation, sort of.
Yeah. So if you and I were the exact same person, we couldn't have a productive conversation, I think.
Right. I can see that.
I think that for this sort of like, man, I'm starting to get fried mentally.
That's okay. We have been talking for a while. This is usually the part. This is the part in the conversation where people start to, myself included, start to kind of run out of brain power and sentences start to become choppier. So that's okay. I mean, this has been fun. You and I, we've been talking for a while. We're going to keep talking, obviously. So no need to force anything into this particular conversation. But was there anything kind of on the tip of your tongue that you definitely just wanted to get out before we wrap it up?
Yeah. So let's talk about if I can ever get this off the tip of my tongue. I might not be able to. I might have to write it.
Give it another go if you want. Sure.
So whatever positive value that comes from two people interacting, that value is a result of there being a non-zero sum interaction between shit that so you could, I think you could think of this like reproduction. So if you have a kid with your sister, it's more likely to you're more likely to produce something that's like potentially fucked up or something. I think it goes the same way. So you're gonna get the best. You're gonna get the most. The highest likelihood of upcycling happens when you maybe have a kid with someone that's really, really different from you.
Right.
Maybe nowhere near close to. They have a totally different configuration everywhere, possibly. I don't know. And maybe the same thing happens with people interacting within groups. So you can't actually. So like cults can't actually have like a 1 + 1 = 3 interaction because everybody's just conforming. You can't have that that sort of making use out of things that weren't used by themselves if you make everything the same. I hope I think that's what I was trying to get at.
Yeah, I think I do. I think I do know what you mean. Like, especially, I think the genetics example or model helped clarify it. Like, basically, you're kind of just getting at that you need, like, the best possible outcomes come from like high variance environments where you can select, where there's a lot of difference going on. There's high possibilities and low possibilities all swirling around, but you're able to select the better possibilities. But like if you didn't have that variance, then you wouldn't get those better possibilities. Is that something like that?
Exactly. And I think that, so if anything, the opposite of a cult may be the best the best group dynamic, where everyone's self-actualizing into totally different people, but they're able to still cohere in ways that they wouldn't have. I'm just too fried right now.
No, yeah. No. That makes sense. The problem with that though is like, don't we currently, isn't our current society of increasing atomization and anomy, isn't that kind of the opposite of a cult? Like the opposite of the absolute absence of cults is just every individual going off into different directions into outer space. And I feel like that's kind of what we have. And you don't want that, because then people start getting crazy ideas of like, people start trying to find meaning in any possible way they possibly can, even though like the community structure required for it has left them. They start trying to re-territorialize on whatever desperate shred of meaning they have, and that's how you get things like, like ethnic civil wars and stuff, I think. But I don't know.
In what ways are I think these ethnic civil wars are a result of just cults around different similarities. Like you have to be maybe something like that.
Yeah, you could be right.
There's not like a centralized like authority that's leading the cult within these like race wars, but they're still trying to succeed off the basis of group similarities instead of group differences. And I think that's where like positive synergies happen, when I'm trying to combine our strengths that only like there are strengths that only we can. I say that I've seen parts of the world my entire life that nobody else has seen, and that's affected me in ways that no one else could be affected. And I think that the best way for us to be, we will be as adapted to reality as we possibly can be when we have made all those little differences matter. We'll get the best picture of reality from that, and then we can adapt in the best way possible from that. So there's still, maybe not exactly the opposite of a cult that has to exist, but like kind of definitely the sort of melting pot premise that I think the U.S. has going is a good idea.
Right. Well, I definitely like your idea about how like you're very keen on maximizing the social identification of and exploitation of people's greatest value and skills wherever they might be hiding. So I see that kind of colors everything you've been saying throughout this conversation. I think you're very attuned to the fact that like, yeah, people do have wildly different value to offer society, and you're thinking a lot about how we can create technologies to find every weird, unique little greatest point of value in different individuals that's currently going like totally ignored or missed because of our very generic, overly blunt, institutionalized, like technologies for exploiting those values. So that's cool. I appreciate that. And I think I've seen that kind of throughout the stuff you've been putting out in this conversation. Yeah, I mean, why don't we just pick this up another day? This has been more than fun enough and edifying enough for one worthwhile conversation, I think.
This is dope. Yeah, I definitely want to keep talking about all this stuff.
Okay, awesome. Good. I'm glad you found it worthwhile also. And like I said, you and I are already chatting together, so we'll just pick this up, soon, like whenever. And we can always fire up the Google Hangouts some other time. But yeah, why don't we just cut it off there? Sound good?
About.
Dude, I just want to say thank you. This has been fun. You're a super smart, interesting young man, and I'm going to be watching your projects with great interest and support. So, like I said,
same. You too. Like you're super interesting. That's why I'm subscribed, is because you're just a super interesting dude. You're really smart also. So
thanks, dude. I really appreciate that. I'm very happy to know you, and thanks for finding me on the internet and your interest in connecting with me and trying to figure some interesting ideas out with me. We'll keep it going for sure. All right, see you later, dude. All right, everyone. I'm gonna cut this broadcast short right now because I'm gonna go see The Purge. Have you heard about this movie? It was recommended to me. Apparently, it's got like some really interesting political subtexts. The person who recommended it to me didn't. It was kind of like almost an ironic. It seemed like apparently, in a lot of ways, it's very silly, but someone thought that I would find it quite interesting, if only as a peculiar look into, how mainstream movie makers are representing cultural conflicts. Anyway, I don't know that much about it, but seems interesting. So that's about to start in a little bit, and I need to run to the cinema. So yeah, I'm going to see The Purge. Maybe if it's interesting at all to me, I will share with you my thoughts at a later date. Anyway, hope you thought that was interesting. Antoine seemed like a totally cool dude. He's got some interesting ideas. I hope that he has success with them. I would like to see him achieve those systems that he's talking about. And yeah, like I said, I'm in touch with him, so we'll probably be talking about this. He's kind of in the community of people that I've kind of been trying to engineer a bit, or as an experiment in my own kind of social engineering. No, it's not a cult. And yeah, so I'll keep you posted on him and stuff like that. And anything else before I close? No, I'm pretty fried too. That was fun. Thank you, everyone. If you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe, like this shit, reply on the shit, you know, all that stuff. Purge is DSA fantasy of the future. Yeah, so that's what I was told. I'm very intrigued to see it. Should we get a compound in Guyana, or is that played out? That's a good question. I don't know. I think, you know, Antoine made some very good comments that were welcome. You know, a little bit of cold water on my theory of cults and the possibility of engineering the ideal and benign, socially optimal cult. And I'll have to digest his criticisms. Obviously, there are a lot of criticisms of that idea. And don't worry, I'm not going to be engineering any kind of cult until the white paper is completely finished and I've proven to myself mathematically without a shadow of doubt that it will work in a beneficial way. Short of that, don't worry, I'm not going to be doing anything insane or crazy in my sincere motivations to build, you know, passionate communities. I'm going to take it slow and go easy and not do anything crazy. I agree. There are many problems with cults. So rest assured. All right, everyone. Thanks for hanging with me. As I said, we got a bunch of streams coming up throughout the week. Thursday night, Friday afternoon. Stay posted. They're gonna be fun. And by the way, if you have any questions or, you know, comments that you want me to give to the people I'll be talking with, definitely just shoot me a message. And if you want to get in my community, by the way, as I said, shoot me a DM on Twitter or go to the About section of the YouTube, find my email, and just shoot me a line telling me that you're interested. And as long as you're not, you know, Jim Jones, I will probably welcome you into the next round of invites. All right, everyone. My internet experiments with talking with all kinds of interesting people continue to surprise and impress me. So yeah, thanks for hanging with me and doing this thing with me. See you later, folks. I'm going to the movies.